I think these are the best brushes in the world. And he said the selection is like nothing I've ever seen. And that is true. We have the largest selection of brushes in the world. And so we have everything, oil painting, watercolor, or acrylic, but then a million other categories: gilding, sign painting, pinstriping. I could go on and on.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold. Brush. My name is Laura Oringo-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. As promised, today we are continuing with part 2 of our exciting collaboration with Da Vinci brushes. Our guest today is Gregory Daniels, their North American importer, who tells us all about the Da Vinci watercolor brushes that are all handmade with the highest quality hair, handles, and ferrules. We discuss the anatomy of the brushes, discuss many of their different series of watercolor brushes, their incredible travel watercolor brushes, and their innovative synthetic vegan brushes that will leave you wondering how they were able to create a brush that almost perfectly mimics a natural brush. Once again, I urge our listeners to watch the video format of the episode at boldbrushshow.com, where you will be able to see exclusive clips of the factory, their highly skilled brush makers at work, as well as brush demonstrations of every brush we mention. If you'd like to hear more about the history of Da Vinci, I highly recommend listening to our previous episode where we go much more in depth on the founder, the factory, their technology, eco friendly practices, and of course, what sets Da Vinci apart from all other brush makers, which is their dedication to excellence in brush making. And if you'd like to know more about their oil painting and acrylic brushes, also check out part 1 because that is the main focus of the episode. Finally, we also want to announce that Da Vinci Brushes and BoldBrush have teamed up to create paintbrush sets for our listeners. Simply visit brushoffer.com/collections/BoldBrush so you can check out these amazing exclusive sets while you listen to the episode. The links can also be found in the description of the episode. And now on with the show. Hello, Greg. Again, welcome back. You are here to talk about the watercolor brushes, which, we had already talked about the oil painting brushes and a little bit about acrylic since, there's a little bit of overlap there. And we talked about those, for our listeners and our viewers. We talked about those in the previous episode of the podcast, but this one is all about watercolor. So, do you mind giving us a little bit about the history of the watercolor brushes in Da Vinci?
Sure, Laura, thanks. Well, we make a huge range of watercolor brushes and natural hair, unique synthetics, and great student watercolor brushes as well. This is another area where we have definitely the largest selection of watercolor brushes in the world, um, and definitely the most shapes. We make the most shapes for watercolorists, whether it's the classic shapes, the round, the flats. As I spoke about in the earlier podcast, we make a huge selection of quill brushes, slant brushes, angled brushes now, miniature brushes. I mean, the miniature small size painting has increased incredibly. Um, so I'm going to say again, we have a new catalog, and you can get the new catalog. It's a beautiful print catalog by emailing me at greg@gregdaniels.com. It's also on the Da Vinci website, davinci-defit.com, or you can find this on the Da Vinci app for the iPhone or whatever type of phone you have, where you can get short videos, measurements. There's a wonderful YouTube channel for all the Da Vinci watercolor brushes and all the Da Vinci brushes in general. I think we have a video now for every single brush we make. And we try to keep them short and brief. And then there are some longer videos as well. But I guess I'll start with kind of classic watercolor brush, which is the Kolinsky Sable. I'm going to talk about natural hair brushes first, just to divide the natural hair brushes from the synthetics.
Mhm.
Um, so we make a line of brushes called the Maestro, and this is our highest quality Kolinsky Sable line, um, only the first quality. And Kolinsky Sable has a snap and a resilience, holds an edge, holds water like no other brush in the world. And over the course of history, it's been used for watercolor, gouache, oil painters using the rounds. Um, we have a huge range of liners, short liners, long liners, inlaid liners, sign painting brushes, lettering brushes. So I think the amount of shapes we make for Kolinsky Sable is mind blowing, really. I mean, we make everything for kind of every purpose. And sometimes people ask me, well, you have three different rounds, the rounds being the most popular. And we do, and that's kind of different. Many brands just have the one basic round. And so we have the Series 10, which is a European round in the Maestro line. And this one's going to have a little bit of a slimmer belly and the fastest action at the tip. We make the Series 11. This one has a bit larger belly. We call it the English shape, and then tapers to a beautiful point. And this one is the same shape as the Winsor Newton Series 7 or the Raphael 8404. It's the exact same shape as those two brushes. So those are also popular sable brushes, the last 100 years or however long. And then we make a very unique brush, the Series 35, with an extra long taper. And this brush was originally made for animators, illustrators, architectural rendering. It was for years the Disney animation brush when they were doing everything by hand. And so this has also now become one of our most popular brushes for watercolorists, gouache artists. And with all of these brushes, these three, we've seen a big upsurge in gouache, the use of these brushes for gouache. Of course, all of, if you see old classic Disney movies where things were painted on cells, that's all sable brushes and gouache. That's any studio that did that in Europe, in America. Generally, that's round sable brushes and gouache. So you can also use them for ink. Um, and so the Maestro line is our top quality line. And like I said, there's every shape. So you just have to kind of, I can't, if I talked about them all, every shape, we would be here a long time on this subject.
Yeah.
So we also that, so that's the first quality. And then generally we always buy the second quality. You can buy sable in up to 10 qualities. And like we dress the hair ourselves. So we clean it. We were not buying a hair in a bundle from a middleman. We do all of what's called the hairdressing ourselves. It's an extra step to control the quality. And Da Vinci, is all about the quality. The same family's been making the brushes since 1890, and we're still, family-owned factory. So everything made by hand is made by brush makers who, perhaps their father or grandfather worked in the factory and made the brushes by hand as well. So it's generations of kind of know-how go into every brush. So like I said, we have the Maestro line. We also then, for artists who want to not spend as much money but get maybe the same effect, we make a line called the Harbin Kolinsky line. That's about 40% less, Series 1526Y. And then we make another round, the Series 36, which we call the Usuri Kolinsky. And that one is kind of the third quality, but still excellent brush. And that's a little less expensive than that. So we make three different qualities in Kolinsky Sable. We make the Maestro, the Harbin, and the Usuri Kolinsky brush. Then the classic kind of, generally all over Europe and in England, people would be using sable brushes, in the past times. And then in France, you go and you see people using squirrel hair brushes, what's called the Petit Gris brushes, generally in quills. We make that brush using only the best quality. That's our Series 418 Petit Gris quill. It's a blue squirrel brush. To my knowledge, there are only 2 or 3 manufacturers that use the best quality in that, and then that you can buy it in much lower quality. But we certainly only use the best. And we also make that brush in rounds and flats with ferrules too, in the traditional shapes. And so this is, what some people refer to as a mop. It holds the most water. It's not going to point like Kolinsky Sable, but it's going to really lay down a lot of color in a wash. Or, there are many different techniques, but So if you want something that's just going to hold a ton of color, this is it. And we have a YouTube channel. You can see all these brushes in use. We've made a short video for every series. Um, and then next we make a brush called the Cosmotop Mix B. And this is a blending of sable and squirrel. And the idea with this is we put some synthetic right up the middle of the brush in the longer hairs, just a little bit. And it was a way to make larger round brushes that again would be less expensive. So here, let's say you wanted to buy a 12 or a 16 or even a 20, it's much more affordable than buying that in a pure sable brush or a pure squirrel hair brush. So it's a blend. And we have um, we have many people who are well-known flower painter brushes in watercolor using this brush because they're using these bigger sizes to do the petals. And so if that interests you, check out that brush, the Cosmotop Mix B, series 5530.
So one of the other things that I love about Da Vinci, which I keep saying that I love because I do, is how much they take care of every single aspect of the brush. It's not just like the hair, it's not just the handles. But I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the actual construction of the watercolor brushes.
Well, the watercolor brushes, the ferrule is very important.
Mhm.
The ferrule being the connecting piece between the brush head and the handle, because of course these brushes are going to spend a lot of time soaking in water, and so not only do we use what we think are the best handles in the world that all come from, like I was talking about, sustainable European forestry, but all of our ferrules are either nickel plated brass, gold plated brass, or in a few instances silver, for all of our watercolor brushes. These are the highest quality ferrules that money can buy, and they're also the best.
Mhm.
So for our whole watercolor line, these are the ferrules we're using. We've developed a very unique crimping of the ferrules. It's not visible as much with other brands where you see things that are like double crimp, triple crimp. That's more ornamental. It's not really something that we feel like we found a much more innovative way um, to crimp our ferrules so that our brushes, whether natural hair or synthetic, we generally hardly ever get any back for losing hair, the ferrule falling apart, the ferrule twisting off. Um, and we also take great care with our both natural hair and synthetic brushes to deeply set the hair or the synthetic below the ferrule, so that the brush has a great architecture. And what I mean by that is the hair is set below the ferrule. So that's the invisible part of the brush you can't see, but that's where the architecture of the brush is, that will really allow the brush to be flexible and to maintain its shape over time. And I always encourage painters, any kind of painter, after you've painted and you've cleaned the brush, to bring it back to its original shape. Because with our brushes, the way they're made, the brushes will really last longer, and you'll get better results if you just bring it back to its original shape. Um, so yes, what's also very important about all these ferrules is, of course, they're rust resistant. They're not going to rust over time. Um, so I get that all the time. I've been working with Da Vinci since 1998, and my family had an art supply store in Los Angeles for 50, 60 years, and we you know I've just found that I've had people come to me um, that have been using Da Vinci brushes. Maybe they met me a long time ago, and they say, "I still have that brush. I'm still using that brush." Or this wash brush has been the best wash brush, the Series 5080 Cosmotop Spin Wash. I've been using it to change my painting. But I generally get that all the time, that the brushes have lasted a long time. They've held their point. They've held their shape. The quills have held their the belly and the shape. Um, and the travel brushes even. I mean, the way they're constructed, each travel brush, you screw it, you take it out, you have the brush head, you can paint, you screw it back together so the head is protected. There's a drying hole at the end, so the brush is naturally dry. And this design is not a new design for us, but we've never changed it because it's indestructible. It's very difficult to damage the brush the way it's designed. And we just keep making more and more different styles of travel brushes. They're so popular. and we get lots of requests. So so yes, the ferrule is very important. It doesn't seem like it is, but not using tin or aluminum or a lower grade metal. Um, that's what makes our watercolor brushes overall last so long.
At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast. And then, I also love, and I mentioned this in the previous video and episode as well, that Da Vinci takes so much care to also create and innovate synthetic brushes that really imitate the same feel and or as close a feel as the natural bristle. So I would love to hear more about some of your synthetic brushes for watercolor.
Yeah, we have a huge line of synthetics for watercolor, and you know, Mr. Deffett, who ran the factory from the time he was after the war. I mean, he's took over the factory with his mother, when he was 17 in 1946, and ran the factory until he was 90. And incredible, he made incredible strides in brush making in every way, shape, and form. And in Europe, he's kind of known as the king of the brush makers. Um, and because he had such a long career and he really innovated in a lot of ways. But we started making these multi-diameter synthetic brushes, so 3 or 5 different thicknesses of fiber blended together. Um, the first brush was the Nova green handle golden synthetic in the 70s, and that has 3 different fibers, thickest on the outside, thinnest on the inside. And then we moved to the Cosmotop Spin, still our overall bestseller, 5 different diameters. And the reason you were doing this was we found a way to blend thicker fibers on the outside, thinner fibers on the inside, so you get this capillary motion. So if you dip the brush in water, especially the Mottler, water will just run up and defy gravity between the different channels, or two, the different thicknesses of fiber, and run right up the brush so that it just grabs and holds water. And a lot of these ideas came from the ancient Egyptians, putting different size reeds into the Nile, and the water would come up. This was capillary motion. There were some of these similar ideas that Leonardo da Vinci had about ditch irrigation and bringing water up out of canals, spreading it across the fields. It's this whole notion of capillary reaction. And that's kind of what we used to make these first synthetic brushes that were had different thicknesses of fiber and were blended in a way that Da Vinci developed. Um, so that's the Nova and the Cosmotop Spin. And then we kind of took that a step further with the Castaneo line. The Castaneo line has been tremendously popular all over the world. And what we did with this is we developed a crimped fiber brush. So if you look at it under our digital microscope, it's a wavy fiber, and that had never been done before. And And Da Vinci developed these fibers. They're not just buying the fibers from the same place everybody else is buying the fibers. They're working with the fiber makers to develop these special fibers for synthetics to reduce the reliance on natural animal hair
Mhm.
over time. So the Castaneo is this crimped fiber brush. It holds a ton of paint. It's become incredibly popular all over the world. Watercolorists, gouache artists, illustrators, and the urban sketchers, which is a big movement, groups all over the world going out and painting. We've been involved in sponsoring them from the very beginning. So we started the Castaneo. We had, round, flat, and we made these quill brushes. And if you told me that a quill brush would be my best-selling brush overall 10 years ago, I would never have believed you. But there you go. That's our best-selling brush overall, is the Castaneo quill brush, series 498. So much so that we made a quill liner, so a longer quill, which is completely unique to us. And then a huge range of regular liners. We have so much demand for liners, and in the Castaneo line, we also make it in our other lines. And then travel brushes. I mean, before we always made the Cosmotop Spin, the synthetic travel brush, and the Maestro, the Kolinsky travel brush. But now we have a huge range of Castaneo travel brushes where you have the round brushes like we've always made in travel brushes. And we now make a quill travel brush, a slant travel brush, a flat travel brush. And we've also made the Castaneo with short handles for people that wanted shorter handles, either to fit in their painting box um, or to just, we had just had a lot of demand for it. And this making all these new shapes and sizes have just come from the demand from art stores and artists themselves to expand the range to make more shapes and sizes in the Castaneo range. So if you haven't tried these, please give them a go. Castaneo range has been incredible for us. It's different from anybody else's what are called faux squirrel brushes. It's a different fiber. And like I said, so the Castaneo is the first crimped fiber brush with 5 diameters of and varying lengths. So, we create all the lengths by hand. So, um, and shaping synthetic brushes for watercolors is very particular. We shape them completely different than we would for our oil and acrylic brushes. You have more of a belly. Um, the brushes can be thicker in the flats and in the belly as well. And we have these unique shapes. Somebody asked us for a super liner, so we made a 55 millimeter liner. So yeah, I mean it's just it's just a huge range of brushes. And again, we make them all in the quills we make up to size 8 and 10 in some of the ranges, and which are very large quill brushes. And certainly the Castaneo and the Cosmotop Spin, we make up to size 40 in the rounds, all the way from 10-aught to 40. So from the very smallest to the largest. Um, and this year we came out with a new brush called the Colineo. And this is our first, we've worked on it for years, synthetic Kolinsky brush. So we're trying to make a Kolinsky sable brush, but with synthetic. And what we did here is we found a way to mix straight fibers and crimped fibers together, 5 different thicknesses, and taper the brush like a natural hair Kolinsky brush. So we feel this Colineo brush is really unique amongst, a lot of manufacturers make synthetic sable brushes. And this is something I think we think is completely different. And all of our brushes, the handles are from sustainable European forestry, generally Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. And the handles then are made by a certain handle manufacturer we've worked with for generations in northern Italy. And so everything's being done ecologically. Da Vinci's built 2 new factories for all their brush making in the last 20 years. And these are, the greenest, cleanest, non-polluting eco brush factories in the world. The old factory we've made into gallery space and artist studios. So artists can do a residency there, whether they're watercolorists, oil painters, acrylic painters. And so yeah, the line of synthetics is very, very different because we've developed these fibers that nobody else has. And they're unique. They're different from other watercolor brushes. We don't call a Castaneo brush a faux squirrel brush. We think it's something completely different. Um, And and on another note, we make very affordable student watercolor brushes, um, because we think that's really important too, that beginners have a great brush. Often if they're using a brush that's too cheap, um, they don't have good results and they get discouraged. So we have a whole line of brushes called the Fit, and which means just fit for all types of paint, and the Junior, which is a very interesting laser engraved brush. It has like a number 2 pencil handle, so it's very easy to hold for beginners. And these are great student lines as well. So we make from kind of the most professional, Kolinsky Sable, down to um, basic beginner brushes that are still made in Germany. We make everything in our factory in Germany. We're one of the last brush manufacturers to make everything. And I really encourage artists, when you look for brushes online or in a store, look at the brush brands and say, do they make those brushes? Do they have a factory? Are they making brushes? Because really, there are only 2 or 3 of us left that are making all of our brushes independently and are independently owned. Um, a lot of watercolor brushes have gone down in quality over the years from major brands because there's been so much consolidation. You know, you have a few brands that own up, a few big corporate companies that own up to like 20 brands. And usually when that happens, you know, the quality of the materials goes down, but especially with brushes, because if you know, in our factory, you have 40 brush makers to 50 brush makers. The head brush maker is a woman, and we have specialists that only make the small sable brushes, women that only make the quill brushes. Um, and maybe their parents were brush makers there, or their grandparents, or their uncles and aunts or cousins, because it takes 3 years to become a master watercolor brush maker. And this is a skill that's often handed down through families for generations. And so it's really knowledge. You can't just open up a brush factory anywhere, because you're not going to find skilled brush makers. This is kind of an ancient art form that comes down through families. And like I said, it takes 3 years to become a brush maker at Da Vinci, and join the brush making guild. And so it's really something special, and it makes the watercolor brushes unique. Um,
Mhm.
Now, so I do get questions more and more these days too about, like, what brushes do you have that would be considered mixed media brushes, which is kind of a term that a lot of brush manufacturers are using now more and more. And I would say, like, we have a great brush called the Nova, and short handle and long handle, but our watercolor series 1570, one of our most popular brushes worldwide. When I started with Da Vinci, we were in 8 countries, and now we're in 95 countries 25 years later. And the
Mm.
Nova is all over the world. So that's a great mixed media brush. The whole line of Nova comes in all the different shapes you could want. Um, and as well, we have like I said, the less expensive lines, the Junior, the Fit. We have one called the Forte Basic that's very stiff. That one you can paint on, stone, or you can paint on wood. So that's designed for that. So it's an enormous range of watercolor brushes, and I encourage you to try them, and look into the travel brushes and the quills if you haven't tried them, because these are become more and more popular over the years. Travel brushes, you can unscrew them, screw them together. The brush head's protected. They can fit in any brand's painting box, whether you're using Daniel Smith or Schminke, or one of the golden watercolor sets. I mean, they fit in all of those. Um, so watercolor squash artists, illustrators, urban sketchers, enjoy
Mhm.
these brushes. We love making them for you. And thank you so much, BoldBrush. We might have some BoldBrush watercolor sets coming up down the line. We're working on oil painting sets at the moment for BoldBrush. But check out the Da Vinci sets. We really make a huge range of sets. And we have specialized sets. So if you just use rounds or you just use quills, you can get specialty sets that just have those shapes. And then we also make shapes as well, where you get, in the Castaneo, you might get one of each shape in a set. But we have a very large range of sets. And often when you buy a set, it's a good way to try something out, and you can save a little money as well in many of the art supply stores and online. But I encourage you all to support your independent art supply stores. They're the first stop you should make. They're the lifeblood of kind of the the art materials industry. And, there are many online dealers as well that carry Da Vinci. But if you ever have trouble finding our brushes, just email us, greg@gregdaniels.com. We'll get you out a catalog. Please check out the Instagram sites. There's Da Vinci Brushes Official, Da Vinci Brushes North America, which is our site. My company runs Gregory Daniels Fine Arts. And it's been great being here, Laura. Thanks. And Da
Yeah.
Vinci's been making the brushes since 1890. My family started in the art supply business in Manhattan in 1924. So next year will be 100 years in art materials. And we love what we do. My
Yeah.
father used to always say to me, once you get a little paint under your fingernail, you can't get out of the art supply industry.
Oh,
So
I
that
love
was
that.
a classic one by him that he
Oh,
always used to tell me about. But thank
yeah.
you very much. I really
Well, thank
appreciate the
you.
opportunity to be on the Bold Brush podcast.
Yes, it's an honor because honestly, I love how, the Da Vinci brush family really it has become so like they're like one of the last bastions of like artisanal brush making that's, been spanning generations. And I think, it's such an honor to have someone here who represents, not just a highly ethical company, but also a company that cares about the actual product that they're making, which is something that's so rare today. So thank you.
Yeah, I think they're really unique in that they're devoted to making the highest quality art materials they possibly can. But the fact that they have been running an art gallery too since 1958, they've had that connection to painters for
Hmm.
such a long time. And they're really in touch with contemporary artists all over the world. And
Yeah.
that's really the fun part of our job is being in touch with artists, visiting with artists. um, and that's what makes the job great, actually.
Yeah.
So
Great. And also for anyone who wants to know a lot more about the history of Da Vinci, definitely check out our previous episode because we go a lot more in depth into the ethics of the company and how, where they started and when they started, because this is a very old company. So definitely go check out that episode. Thank you so much, Greg. I will also be including every single link you mentioned in the show notes. And also, if anyone wants a catalog, the link is there as well.
thanks, Laura, and thanks, Bold Brush. It's been great working with Bold Brush. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from a lot of artists, and I appreciate the opportunity very much. Thank you.
Of course. Yes. We here at BoldBrush want to extend our sincerest gratitude to Gregory Daniels as well as the team at Da Vinci for all of their hard work in making this collaboration possible. I personally also want to thank Michael Olson for providing me with all of the footage of the Da Vinci factory, as well as all the brush demos. If you're listening to this episode, I highly recommend visiting boldbrushshow.com to watch the video version of the episode. You'll be able to visually see what the Da Vinci factory is like, see the wonderful artisans and makers of the brushes, and also the demonstrations of the specific brushes we mentioned. And once again, part one is mostly about the history of Da Vinci, their practices, some of the history of Gregory Daniels and his family, as well as the oil painting and acrylic brushes. And of course, the site where you can purchase the Da Vinci and Bold Brush paintbrush sets is live. Just visit brushoffer.com/collections/boldbrush and you'll find them there. We also have a discount code to get an extra 10% off the already special pricing at checkout. Just use the code BoldBrush. Your order supports our community efforts at BoldBrush and Faso.